I more or less agree with John Lewis, although I think he may have overstated the case. But it is very difficult to believe that in some of the crowds that have been attracted by McCain and by Sarah Palin, that there are not a lot of prejudiced people in that crowd, and that prejudice, I don't think McCain himself, I'm not trying to say he's prejudiced. Whether he's done all that he could to stop that, I don't know. Sarah Palin, as far as I'm aware, has done nothing. Well, we'd gone down there. I went down with one or two people with me, and with General Abrams, who had two officers with him. And we didn't know what Governor Wallace was going to do, except we thought he was going to stand in the door, and we doubted very much he was going to give in. Although we knew he did not want violence, the question was whether he could prevent it. And actually, I didn't get much sleep the night before. There was a reporter who had a nervous breakdown. We had to get him to a hospital and things of that kind. And I went out in the morning and picked up Vivian Malone and James Hood. John Doerr and I went out and picked the two of them up in Birmingham, drove them back to Tuscaloosa. On the way back, Bobby called. We were in a Border Patrol car with radio connections with Washington. Bobby called, and he said, "What are you going to say to Governor Wallace?" And I said, "I don't really know." He said, "Well, the president wants you to make him look foolish." I said, "Fine. Have you got any ideas as to how to do that?" He said, "Oh, don't worry, Nick, you'll do fine." And so we went on to the university. I had done a couple of things that I was pleased with. One was that I said I would go confront Governor Wallace without the two black students. I saw no reason why they should be insulted by the governor. And one of the things that I find moving even today was that the U.S. Attorney in Birmingham and the U.S. Marshal in Birmingham, both political appointees in the Deep South, insisted on going with me, that it was part of their job too. And that was a very courageous thing in the Alabama of that time. And it was hot as Hades. And so we walked up to the door that they designated. And I got in the first words, I think, and the governor wanted to shut me up, and we went back and forth a little bit, and I haven't to this day. I've seen it on television, but I can't remember what I said. Except I remember a couple of things that I liked. One was it annoyed the governor when I said, "I don't know what the purpose of this big show is. It's just two students, qualified students, trying to get into the university to which they're entitled to be admitted. And I don't see any reason for this show." That he didn't like that. And so they tried to put mics on me, the media did, and I wouldn't have them. But there was no worry about that. He had a mic in every pocket of his suit and trousers and jacket and around his neck and every other place. So there wasn't much danger of my not being known. And then I had arranged with Frank Rose, the president, that when he rejected us, as we expected, that I would take Vivian and John Doerr would take Jimmy Hood to their dormitory rooms. So we didn't leave the campus, which I thought was important. And at that time, told the president time to federalize the Guard, put it in federal service, the Alabama National Guard, which was commanded at that time by General Graham, who knew the governor very well. And so I remember going back to telling General Abrams, who had also slept all night in his seersucker suit. And I said that we had to nationalize the Guard, and one of the lieutenant colonel with him said to the general, I assume this will be, to General Abrams, I assume this will be uniform, sir. And Abrams, who always had a big cigar in his mouth, said, nah. He said, I don't think so. Graham knows who I am. And so the Guard got put in federal service. Then Abrams came to me about an hour later, said, General Graham has talked to the governor. They were quite friendly, Graham and the governor. And the governor wants to go back to be confronted by the military under Graham's command. And if so, he will make a brief speech, and he will leave all of his law enforcement people with instructions to keep order. And that seemed like a hell of a good deal to me. Well, it's interesting to me. I mean, I felt, I've been down at Ole Miss where we had a really bad riot, little people killed and a lot of people wounded, and a terrible riot. And I felt that that was a failure on our part. I'm not sure in retrospect that it was. I think you had to have an incident of that kind and that dramatic a thing with the Army coming in 22,000 strong into Oxford, Mississippi. But I think you had to have it. And people had to see what was in fact being faced. And I think in retrospect that was a necessary part of the whole civil rights movement, that one such incident should occur. And I think that in a funny way, Governor Wallace saw it the same way. He didn't want that kind of an incident to happen in Alabama. Governor Barnett did not get any credit for trying to keep James Meredith out of the University of Mississippi and causing a riot. That was not something that people in Mississippi had really contemplated. But we didn't have cell phones then, so that was lucky. I just told her I had to go out of town, that I was going down to Oxford. She knew what was going on there. But I was lucky enough in my life to marry a remarkable woman, so I could tell her where I was doing and what I was doing, and she didn't try to lecture me or deter me. You have to understand that Vivian Malone was as so many of the young blacks were, she was an exceptional person and very courageous one, as were James Hood and James Meredith. But I said, you've got to sit down in the cafeteria and eat, because you're going to have to do that. And the sooner we get over that, the better. And she said, okay. And so she did. She sat by herself at a table. And almost immediately, 2 other girl students came over and sat down with her, white students. And I think they were both from the North, to tell the truth. But that didn't make very much difference. It was something had happened. We had crossed the threshold when that happened. But one of the differences between the University of Mississippi then, not today, but then, and the University of Alabama is that the president of the University of Alabama, Frank Rose, wanted the university integrated. And that was a very important factor. He knew Bobby Kennedy slightly, and he was a source of information for us and a source of support throughout. You can think of the riot at Ole Miss. You can think of the 4 girls killed in the Birmingham bombing. You can think of the Situation Voting Act with Selma, with Sheriff Clark. I mean, some of the things they did, they had young kids were demonstrating. Really kids, 10 years old, 12 years old. And the police chasing them with fire hoses and chasing them way down the road and maybe 3 miles, something like that, and then letting them escape. And then the march in Selma trying to go across the Pettus Bridge. But to see people who were unarmed, asserting a constitutional right. Sheriff Clark was a perfect foil. I mean, the idea of using carrot prods and hoses on people like that, horses, and that was going by television into rooms all around the country. And I think the American people just said, enough is enough, stop it. Which we should have said long before.